Everybody has an international mentorship network. Of course, we all talk to different colleagues around the world all the time. We may not, though, be using that network to its best advantage when it comes to putting together comments in those cover letters, in those submissions to journals, to make sure that we get those colleagues who are going to review our papers suggested to journals. So senior colleagues, authors of other papers, it's a good idea to reach out to people, talk to them about your research. If you're finishing a project, you've got the abstract, maybe you've got the title, you've got the main ideas of the work, why not send that out to international colleagues and start to talk to them about the project? And then, of course, you can say, hey, would you be interested in acting as a peer reviewer when I send this off to a journal? Initiate those discussions, build a network. This, of course, is how you set up a network, an international network, a mentorship network, in order to make sure that you have people in your international network who would be able to act as peer reviewers. How is this done? Of course, in practice, using those channels. Are you on ResearchGate? Are you on academia? Are you using LinkedIn? Do you have a Google Scholar profile? We all have a mentorship network of some kind, but are you using that mentorship network in order to use it to your advantage? And I see a comment coming in from Jolt that the last thing you want to do is to send your abstract and your ideas around. I totally disagree. People use preprint servers all the time. They reach out to international colleagues. This is the best way to make sure that you get people interested in your research and potentially around in order to peer review it effectively. The last thing you want to do is send a paper to a journal without having some suggestions in the covering letter, in the online system, for colleagues that you already know are going to be favorable to your research. So network, stay social, build your network, collaborate, and make sure that those collaborating colleagues in your social networks are aware of your work and are ready when you ask them to act as peer reviewers. Editors, people like me who manage international journals, we manage hundreds of papers all the time, and we don't know who we're going to ask to act as reviewers for those papers. We rely on author suggestions. We rely on the comments that authors make in those cover letters. We often use those cover letters that authors submit to journals in order to find people who would be suitable for peer reviewers. You've all seen these online systems. You've all seen these Manuscript Central, Editorial Manager, open journal systems. You often don't have the opportunity in the journal online system anymore to select reviewers. Often journals have deleted that option. They only give you the chance to deselect colleagues. That's because authors were often abusing the system. So in your cover letter, you've got the opportunity to make suggestions for colleagues who you think would be suitable as reviewers for your paper, who can act as peer reviewers. And so that's why networking, being social, reaching out to people and talking about your work can be so important. So we provide training at all stages of the academic cycle. Ideas, how to come up with good ideas for your research, how to win funding, how to collect and analyze your data, how to select appropriate journals, Bentham Science, how to write papers, how to make submissions, and how to manage the peer review and publishing process. So let's imagine we've written a paper, we've sent it out for peer review, we've sent it to a journal, it's gone back from the journal to the authors after peer review. You're now thinking, what do those different decisions that academic journals make, what do they mean? Usually, we get one of four possible decisions that come back from journals after peer review: reject, accept, minor revisions, or major revisions. And let me tell you that the bottom two are the most common after peer review. We all get rejected, of course, that happens all the time. We'll talk about how to deal with rejection in a minute, but usually, most often, your papers come back by and large with revisions of some kind after first review. And how you respond to these comments that come back from editors is very important in determining the eventual outcome of your paper. So minor revisions, and check the wording of the emails that you get from those editors. Common decision from reviewers if a paper is considered almost ready for publication. The key thing here is to keep in mind that if you get minor comments, small changes, the wording usually says something like minor revisions required, probably the editor will not be sending the paper back to the same reviewers again. Probably the editor will be making a decision on his or her own. But if you get major revisions, moderate revisions, substantial changes required, serious issues with your article that are going to require significant changes, you have to keep in mind that the wording of your response document will be different, because it's almost certain that the same peer reviewers are going to be at least given the opportunity to look at your paper again. So your wording, what you put into your response documents in these different situations can be very important in determining the final outcome of your submission. Effectively responding to those review comments is a real skill, and we provide training in this as well. Lots of authors around the world, lots of researchers around the world don't really know how to do this effectively. You've got comments back from a journal after peer review, what to do. The most important thing, of course, is to show the editor that you're taking the process seriously. That means making a comprehensive response document that interleaves the comments from the reviewers with your responses. All of them. Make a response document that interleaves the review comments with your responses. Do all of them, even the small ones, and make sure that you are sensible and polite. You'd be amazed, you'd be flabbergasted, you'd be fantastified by the number of rude remarks, rude comments that authors send back to journals in response to comments. And that, of course, is a bad idea as an author submitting to a journal, because it immediately makes the editor feel bad. It immediately puts the editor on the back foot. And if your paper's going back to the same peer reviewers, how are they going to feel if you make negative comments about their comments? So replying to peer review effectively, this is important. If you've received comments back from a journal, the most important thing is to show the editor that you're taking the process seriously. Make a response document that interleaves all those review comments with your responses. Do all the comments, even the small ones, and keep it sensible and polite. We will show you now how to do this. As you get those comments back from a journal, as you interleave your responses to those review comments into a document, and make sure you address the rebuttal letter back to the editor. Here's an example. I find that polite wording in English can help a lot. We would like to thank the 2 peer reviewers who worked on our paper for their considerable efforts and for the time they devoted to our work. Peer reviewers and editors, they read these kinds of comments and they think, yes, I did make a considerable effort. Yes, I did devote a considerable time. That's great that the authors have appreciated that. We've made almost all the changes requested, and we enclose a revised manuscript. Changes to our paper can be seen in red in the main document. This is important. Minimize the amount of work that the editor has to do. Make sure it's clear to the editor what changes you made. Make it obvious. Use a different color. Use the strike through tool in Word so that the editor doesn't have to go through all the comments and compare your document with the original submission in order to maintain the system. So, in my opinion, the main issue with this paper, we would like to thank Reviewer 1 for this insightful and accurate comment. We've reworked all our analyses as requested. Thank you for this editorial comment. All of the changes, all of the small changes that the journal is asking. So making it comprehensive, making it polite, and making it as easy as possible for the editor to make a decision about your paper. However, having said that, we all get bad reviews. How do you manage if you have negative reviews about your paper? We always teach people, try not to worry about those negative comments. There are tricks that you can use for responding to negative review comments. I would say that you can start your response document back to the journal by being positive. Tell the editor first about the comments received that you agree with and talk about the changes that you've made. Then you fold the responses to the negative comments into the middle of the response letter. This is called a shit sandwich technique in marketing and sales. You bury the bad news in the middle of sets of positive news and be positive and polite. Editors want to see that you're taking the review process seriously. If you disagree with comments that reviewers make on your paper, you've got to have evidence for that. You've got to have citations. You've got to be able to back up that point of view. Reviewers making comments on your paper can say anything they want about your paper. They don't need evidence. They can just make a point of view comment. But if you disagree, you as the author have to have citations. You've got to have evidence to back up why you're not going to make that particular change. And also, let me say that at the end of the day, when you get those emails back from journals containing review comments, have a look at the way the emails are worded, because journals, publishing companies, they want to speed up their workflows. They often give the game away if they intend to accept your paper at the end of the process. So you may get another round of review comments, but this time the email looks different. Are you being provided with production or copyright transfer information? If this is the case from the journal, then of course the journal production team expect that your paper will be accepted. So this is another insight from the editorial office that I hope will help you in that process of submitting, getting your papers successfully through the peer review process. What happens though if your paper gets rejected? This happens all the time. I would say that other than sales, other than working as a salesperson, we academics, we researchers experience rejection almost more often than any other line of work. Happens all the time. Papers, grant applications, they get rejected. If you feel that your work was well done, it deserves to reach the journal's audience, it demonstrates importance, and you've been rejected, but with comments that you feel you can address, there's no harm in writing an appeal letter to the editor. Editors change their minds all the time. If they get carefully written, polite, constructive emails from authors that say things like, we accept all the comments, we feel we can make all the changes requested, why not give us another chance to make a revised submission? They will often say, sure, send us back a revised version if you really can make all those changes. So it's always worth writing an appeal letter if your paper gets rejected, because after all, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is that the paper stays rejected. It's already been rejected, right? So you might as well write that email off to the editor and ask them if you can have another chance, if you feel you can adequately revise the work. And I would also say, from my own experience, writing and publishing almost 300 papers so far in my career, if you are confident, if you believe in your work, if you feel that you have been unfairly treated in the peer review process, then by all means also appeal and write to the editor. We've got lots of examples from our publishing. You can see some examples on this slide of papers that got submitted to journals. They got rejected. We felt that the comments we received on those papers were unfair, inappropriate in some cases. We wrote back to the journals. We asked for another chance. We asked for another round of peer review with more balanced reviewers. The editor said, sure, you've made a reasoned argument as to why this paper should be considered again. You've told me why you feel you've been unfairly treated. We'll send the paper out for review again. Let's have another chance. And the paper ended up getting accepted. One of the keys to success as an international researcher is confidence, belief in your work. This paper that we published in Nature in 2013 got rejected. The reviewers said they didn't understand the method. We said to the editor, hey, can we explain the method in more detail? It eventually got reviewed again and it got accepted. Don't miss out on those killer publications, those publications that can change the course of your career just because you get unfairly treated in the review process. So, negative review comments, don't agree. This is totally normal. Peer reviewers are humans. Editors are guided by reviewers. Don't just take it. Don't just move on too fast. Don't just get down about those negative comments. Take some time, write to the editor, communicate, explain with evidence why the reviewers are incorrect, because often journal editors change their minds following direct communication from authors. Did you know that about 40% of articles published in leading international journals were initially rejected following peer review? So if you get rejected and if you feel unfairly treated, or you can address the comments, write to the editor, explain your point of view, and let's see what happens, because often the editor will respond positively. I want now quickly to talk a little bit about actually doing peer review. We all get asked, we all get invited to perform peer review. Whether you should accept to do that or not is a good question. All journals are different. Some will lead you, others won't. But how are you going to learn this key transferable skill? In my experience, international researchers around the world are almost never given any training in how to act as a peer reviewer. We're just expected to be able to do it. We're just get to that stage. We're postdocs. We're getting our academic positions and we start getting requests from journals to make peer review for them. We've never been trained in how to do it. This is a key transferable skill. Imagine your boss in business asks you to comment on a document that they've written, approaching that with a positive, constructive mindset rather than a negative, destructive mindset, as most academic peer reviewers tend to work, as you know yourself. This can seriously enhance or have a negative impact on your career. So performing peer review is a key skill. If you get asked to do it by a journal, stop and think about whether this is a good idea for your career development. Do you have any conflicts of interest? Do you know the authors? Have you ever worked with them? If you have, you should not be reviewing their papers. Is this your field? Do you have the expertise? Are you able to make constructive, positive comments about this particular piece of work? And do you have the time? There's nothing worse than accepting to do a review and then running out of time to do it, or sending something back to a journal that's not comprehensive. That's a bad idea. If you've been asked to do a peer review, should you do it? Things to consider. Importantly, you can use this process as a peer reviewer to maximize your career potential. So you should be responsible. You should be thorough. You should try to be positive. Of course, this is, as I've mentioned, a very important transferable skill inside and outside of academia. I say to young researchers all the time around the world, you may not end up working professionally in academia, but you will nevertheless learn a huge number of transferable skills from being a master's student, from being a PhD student, from being a postdoc, from being an early career researcher. That will be hugely, hugely valuable in your career in other fields, in particular peer review, conducting a fair and balanced assessment of a colleague's work. You're being asked, of course, to assess the suitability of this paper for publication in a particular journal. So I would say, as a starting point, you can ask yourself two key questions.